Welcome to episode 11 of the Party Wagon Podcast, where we talk about all things TMNT, past, present, and future. I'm Brendan from the YouTube channel Brendan's Rambles.
And I'm Eric from the YouTube channel Know You Grow Up. And today we have a very special guest with us. So today we have Chris Fawcett, author of the book Rad Plastic. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey guys, how are you doing? It's pretty nice down here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Oh wait, are we doing this? Okay, here.
Yeah, I'll call for the book. Yeah,
I have one too.
Oh really? Yeah.
Yeah, I got a discount.
Yeah, probably.
You can get your sign, no problem.
I'm tight with the author, so yeah.
Right? Yeah, Chris, so why don't you go ahead and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Kind of give us your nerd origin, maybe from what you were into as a kid to your teen years and how you transitioned to being this very popular person in our small bubble here.
Yeah, okay, well, if you want to go back to childhood, I'm a Star Wars kid. So okay. Star Wars was huge for me. Saw all three of the originals in the theaters. I was very young. But just went Bambus for the toys. It was literally like after I saw that first movie, there was nothing else I wanted for Christmas, right, birthdays, whatever, except Star Wars toys. Like, forget about it. I don't need anything else. So that was like sort of my intro to toy stuff. I was always kind of had a collector's mindset, which is weird because nobody else in my family does. I mean, even when I was young, I would collect stamps and coins and rocks and, all the things you can get as a whatever, an 8-year-old that, you can collect. And so I always kind of had that mentality. And then my father actually was in the toy industry. He worked at Little Tykes. He was their first head of engineering at Little Tykes. So his claim to fame is he helped engineer and design the Cozy Coupe. Little red Flintstones pedal and ride car.
Yep, I had one of those as a kid.
Every kid had
that.
Right?
So that's his claim to fame. He's actually on Wikipedia as like one of the designers of the Cozy Coupe. And a lot of the other things that you've probably seen from Little Tykes, the little red sliding board and little red and yellow picnic table and like the turtle, speaking of turtles, the turtle sandbox. Yep. Yes.
That's another one that I feel like everybody had.
Turtle connection. This is the first time I've made that connection. Dang, I wonder if he has a prototype of the big turtle sandbox. So I kind of grew up in the toy family, right? Because my dad was doing this. He would use me and my brother as test subjects for different things. I remember they had this little electric powered ride-on like train, but it ran on tracks. It's sort of like, the little cars you see kids riding around in today, but it ran on a set of railroad tracks. I remember him bringing that home and he would have us test ride it and all this stuff. So from very early on, I was sort of enmeshed in the industry. And then when I got in high school, I started working he left Little Tykes and started his own consulting firm and did a lot of toy industry stuff there as well. And I worked for that firm from like my junior year of high school through, I don't know, well after college. So did a lot of toy stuff as an engineer at that point for Little Tykes, a company called Step 2. And also for Fisher-Price. We did a lot of work for Fisher-Price. So I sort of have my nerd creds of being a Star Wars, nerd, but then I have my sort of professional creds of being a toy guy as well.
Yeah.
So basically, you had the coolest childhood. You had the childhood we all wanted. You had the dad that we all wanted. And he just came home and like, try out these toys and just.
There's only one thing that I always yell at him for, and I remember this in 1978. He went to interview at Kenner. And they offered him a job, and he would have been working on Star Wars, and he turned it down to go to Little Tykes. I never forget.
Oh my God! Could you imagine if he got to work on that line?
Yeah,
I can't even imagine. That would be like if my dad worked for Playmates back when Turtles was
exactly.
Right?
I remember that trip because we had one of those campers that goes in the back of a pickup truck, and we took the whole family there, and we actually went to see Star Wars while we were in Cincinnati after his interview. But he brought back some toys, from his interview for me. I remember there was a Darth Vader case, and I remember the Princess Leia figure that he brought back. I don't know what else, but none of them were anything like special or anything. It was just some products he got from them when he interviewed. So, yeah. But anyway, still, I get to work in the industry, which is really fun.
That's awesome. That's because me and Eric, we love toys. We love Turtles, but we are still just like we're outside of that world professionally. We don't know what goes on behind the curtain. So it's like for us, we're not at the level you collect like prototypes and all this awesome stuff like that. Like we just get the stuff everybody can get. So I just can't imagine what it's like growing up like that. I mean, as a kid, I felt like, oh, my dad just works in oil. Where the hell's the future in that? But like,
if he's bringing home stuff from work, it's not anything you want, right?
Right.
My dad brought home stuff from work. I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, no, he's bringing you home Darth Vader and everything. So
yeah, exactly. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
So did his work kind of influence what you wanted to do, or just by coincidence did you happen to go into the same thing?
Well, he was an engineer, and I kind of have pretty good math chops. I always did, even as a really young kid. So, I decided in high school that was probably what I was going to do in college. And then when he left Little Tykes, which was I think it was like my sophomore year of high school, and he started his own consulting firm, now he had the ability to say, hey, you want to come in here? I'll teach you engineering. You're still in high school, but I need help. I can't get all the work done I'm getting. And he knew I was smart enough that he could show me how to do, the basic CAD design stuff. And so he did that. And I basically worked there part-time through my freshman year of college. And then after my freshman year, I started working full-time and went to college part-time. So I was like, why am I trying to rush through college? I'm already got the career here doing engineering. I'm getting real world engineering experience. That's way better than school. Yeah. So it took me like 7-8 years to get my degree, but I was working 40 hours.
Preaching the choir there.
Yeah. So
I have a friend he's into physics. Now, not if he hears this, he's not going to listen to this, but if he does, I'm sorry. But he's into physics, and he has this great job, but he's still just sticking around like, oh, I have to get this diploma. It's like, dude, you got the job that the diploma gets you.
Sometimes you just feel like you're in so deep, you got to finish, though. I mean, that's how it was for me. Like, I started it, and I'm like, I changed majors a million times, and it's just like, I got to finish this. Like, I started, I have to finish. So
yeah, and as long as it helped me get my next job, whatever that was. So
yeah,
whatever that was.
Yeah, I just took my time. There's no hurry.
Gotcha. So
so then collecting wise as an adult, so I kind of fell out of it as everybody did when they were kids. I kind of always collected a little bit. I was always into comic books, right from childhood through to college. I collected comic books, mostly all the Star Wars ones that were about, the early Dark Horse comics and that kind of stuff. But then I had a buddy. I was in a band, and I had a friend in the band who had a girlfriend that collected Barbie, and she got him into collecting toys, and his thing was also Star Wars. He was about my age. And so he started talking to me because he knew I was a Star Wars fan. And so I started collecting the old Star Wars toys and trying to, went to my parents' house. They hadn't thrown anything out. I pulled all that stuff out and got it all out, found out what I was missing, started collecting that stuff. And then very quickly moved into prototype stuff. And because I was in Ohio and Cincinnati's in southwestern Ohio, I was up in Cleveland, Akron area, which is sort of north central. There were, there's a lot of manufacturing and engineering type jobs around there. Fisher Price was just across the border in New York, 3-4 hours away. Little Tykes was right there in northern Ohio where I was. Cincinnati, was in southeastern Ohio. So a lot of the engineers sort of traveled around through these different companies across the state or the area where they didn't want to move, across the country. So I was actually working on contract at the Hoover Company and bumped into a guy that was about my age and was also a Star Wars fan. And he's like, hey, do you know Dave? He works down the hall this way. I'm like, no, I don't think I met him. This is maybe a month into this contract work. He's like, yeah, Dave used to work at Kenner. I'm like, really? Okay. Because at this point in time, I'd already sort of started digging for some prototypes and found a few things. I was really getting interested into it. And so he's like, yeah, I'll introduce you. And so he walked me down. It's like 10 in the morning. Walked me down to Dave's office and introduced me, and we sort of hit it off. And I said, yeah, man, if you have anything, he was a designer, so he did a lot of artwork and things like that. And I said, if you got anything cool you kept, I'd love to see it. He's like, I might have some few things. So fast forward 2 hours, right after lunch, he comes walking up to my desk. I went home after lunch at lunchtime and I picked something up, and he opens a box, and inside the box is a hand-painted hard copy of a 12-inch IG-88 figure. And my jaw just hit the floor. I'd never seen anything like that before. So that was the beginning of some really good acquisitions, but also a really good friendship that I've maintained to today. We used to, I was there about 4 years on contract, and he was the person I hung out with all the time. We just had the similar mentality, both coming from the toy industry, and so yeah, got a good friendship and some really neat stuff from him as well.
Nice. So
That's
the
awesome.
first prototypes you started searching for, was it Star Wars then, not Turtles?
Yeah, it was Star Wars. I got, online early, and just, I don't know, I gravitated to that stuff. I think the very first thing I bought was a proof card for Han Hoth on like a Empire or a Jedi card. I can't remember which one was the first one. It's right over there somewhere. I still have it to this day. But yeah, that's the very first prototype I bought. I mean, I graduated, a lot of collectors go through these stages. They start with loose and loose complete, and they're like, oh, I want something more. They go to the rare loose ones, and they're like, oh, I need something better. They go to min on cards, and then rare min on cards, and like, I went through that whole phase in probably less than a year and landed on, I'm going for prototype. I just ramped right up. I don't know what it was. It's just they excited me more than just the production stuff did. I can't tell you exactly what in my brain makes that endorphin go more with those, but it did, and I recognized it. So I started doing that and searching for things. And this is about probably a year after I started really looking to collect prototypes. I met Dave and that whole thing. And then, of course, he gave me lots of names of all of his friends and people, and I started calling around to those people. And so it's sort of snowballed from there. And,
Yeah. I can understand the appeal. Like I said, I'm not a prototype collector myself, but I can understand it because there's something when you get into all those like paint variants and card back variants and all that stuff and sealed and all that, there's still just something extra special about a prototype that the itch from those does not quite get scratched the same way that a prototype would. So in the intro of the book, you say, I believe it's 2017, that you actually got into the Turtles. You say that you were into Star Wars most of your life, that the Turtles line, you kind of started getting real deep into it in 2017. Was that like, were you aware of it back in the day? Were you paying attention to it, collecting some of it, but like not too into it? Or were you like completely removed from it and then just had your eyes open like, oh my God, what is this thing when you found it?
No, not completely removed, because I did like it as a property. I remember in college, I played that the first 4-player stand-up game, beat 'em up a ton. Like it was in our student center. I would always, after classes in college were done at 3:00, I would go home and I would turn on the afternoon cartoons to do my homework too. And that's why we were talking earlier before we started this, how I'm into Darkwing Duck. That's how I got into Darkwing Duck. That's how I like the Turtles. But I never really collected the line much, other than I will say there was a point in, like, it must have been right around 2000 or so. I was sitting there thinking, like, man, this Star Wars stuff is blowing up. It's getting really expensive. I'm like, what's the next thing going to be? And I'm like, I bet you Turtles is going to be worth a lot of money someday. Oh, yeah. And I actually started collecting min on card Turtles. I did it for about 6 months, and I'm like, what am I doing? I don't, Turtles isn't my thing. Let me focus on Star Wars. And I wish I hadn't done that. I should have kept going, because it was actually a really great idea. Like, I started like with the early ones. I should have started with the later ones. Like, what are the rare ones? Let me go get those now and just set them aside. But so I did have that small little turtle collecting right around 2000 that lasted for maybe it was a year, probably not quite a year. But then, yeah, nothing really there until fast forward to 2017.
In 2000, that was right after Phantom Menace came out. So that was like when Star Wars stuff was blowing up, like bigger than ever. So
yeah, the prices of the vintage stuff just went through the roof over that short, like 2 or 3 year period.
Yeah.
And they did it again for Force Awakens as well. They just ramped up a lot. But so I guess I was probably thinking, man, the Star Wars stuff's going so crazy. Why do I want to do these? But at the time, it's like, I'm getting the first 4 first card release, and they were like $15, and like I'm sure a scratch would have been like $100 or something. I don't know.
Maybe not even.
Yeah, that probably would have been the best time, honestly, because that was kind of the dark age to where they're like, okay, Turtles might be dead before it got that 2003 reboot. So that was probably the lowest point as far as being able to get expensive figures for low prices.
Yeah, I kind of kicked myself for not keep going with that idea, because it was a good idea, but what are you going to do? You win some, you lose some.
I got back into recollecting the vintage line in around 2006, 2007. And at that time, that was post 2003 cartoon, obviously. It was still running at the time. At that time, you could get scratch loose for like $300 sometimes on eBay. So it's like in 2000, he was probably like $50.
And it's just crazy what the prices have done in the last like 4 years. It's been insane. Yeah. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
started in 2017, like a minimum card scratch was like $1,000. You know, now
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
what,
At
6 or
least.
7?
Oh, probably, yeah. Because I mean,
Yeah, it's
Lucy
just great.
goes for about 2 now. So
Yeah. I mean, just before, like a couple hours ago, I was checking my YouTube messages, and there was a comment on Eric, you just did a video on like mint card collecting versus loose collecting. And in the comments we were talking about, I have Shogun Shote, and I bought him not even that long ago. I think it was 2017 or 2018. And or probably about 2016, 2017. And I got him new in the card for like it was under $300. And I opened him. And I know some people will want to kill me if they hear that I did that, because then Eric's like, yeah, you don't want to know what he's worth now. And I just want an eBay. I'm like, what is he going for these days? People are selling him for $2,000 on the card back. So it's like, I still no regrets. He's so cool out of the package. I know.
yeah, he's a very cool figure.
And when I was
You probably could have found a loose one to buy and had both of them.
Well, that was the thing. I went with the package one because all the loose ones were missing one of the armor pads on him or something, or they're missing one sword. And I know as a little kid, I would have wanted to open them up. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it for little Brendan. So,
Yeah. So how did you get in deep with turtles then? Like, what made you go from just kind of at one point in your life being so about it to just diving into the deep end and being like, okay, this is the route I want to go. I want to get into these prototypes and I want to write a book about it.
It was a complete accident. Serendipity. I mean, I've been hunting Kenner stuff for 2 decades and just happened to cross someone that had family members that crossed over, from West Coast toy to East Coast toy, which is unusual. You don't see a lot. See, generally the West Coast toy, Mattel out there, obviously Playmates out there, they generally tend to run in those circles back and forth between those companies and Tomy some too. I think they're like they're somewhere in the West Iowa or something. I don't remember. But then you see the West Coast or the East Coast guys, which is Hasbro and Kenner and Fisher Price and the sort of the engineers and designers run through those circles. But I just happened to stumble upon somebody who had sort of a foot in both worlds in their family. And that person had some Kenner things, but also had a ridiculous amount of Turtles things. And as it was one of those days where, I knew this person had some stuff because I had talked to this person 15 years ago, and it was finally time to sell because there was a child getting ready to go to college, and so it's like, well, why don't you come over and take a look now? I had a brief look 15 years ago, basically walked down the basement, see all the tubs? Yeah, I'll open one for you. And that was kind of it. I didn't know what was there. And, I was obviously hoping for tons of Star Wars, but what I found was a ridiculous amount of Turtles. And the more I just sort of looked through things, and, it was obviously one of these treasure hunting moments that you will never forget. So there's an emotional attachment that instantly happens there right on the moment, right? Oh my God, like I've got to keep something from this, just if nothing else is a memento of this day. But the more I started looking at it and got, brought some stuff home and started digging through it and like identifying it. And what is this? And like, I don't even know what this figure is. He's not on any of the catalogs. He's not on any of the websites. What the hell is this guy? And things like that. And you start going, oh man, as you're looking at it and laying on, this is really great. These sculpts are really great, and like the paint jobs are really bright and vibrant. And, I was into Star Wars, which I love because of the property. But let's face it, you look at those figures and there's a lot of browns and blacks and greens.
Yeah.
And like, right, they're fairly drab from a color palette standpoint, with a few exceptions, especially the earlier ones like Greedo and Snaggletooth, right? Like the crazy disco colors from the 78 releases. But so I just kind of both fell in love with the sculpting and the aesthetics of it and the paint jobs as I was sort of parsing through that collection. And I was like, okay, well, what do I want to keep? And the more I thought about it, I'm like, oh, I'll keep these two. I like those two too. And then my wife comes down. She's like, I like these. Keep those. I'm like, oh, all right. Put those in the pile. And it's like, eventually it's just like, and I knew right then there was enough material right there to do a book. Maybe not as big of a book as I ended up doing, but I was like, there's enough here. And this is pretty cool because people have done tons of books on Star Wars and they all tend to be very niche focused, like Star Wars proof cards, Star Wars, this narrow thing and that narrow thing, Star Wars micro collection. And I was like, I could do a comprehensive one for this line. and I think the reason that people didn't do that for Star Wars is because the material's so spread out. It's it would be very hard to go travel around the country to all these collections and find all these materials, and take pictures would be very expensive proposition. So, but I'm like, but it's all right here. Like, I've got enough right here. Like, why wouldn't I do this? And so I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, I may as well go in whole hog and find more people and get as much stuff as I possibly can for the book. So
for this first round, like, how much stuff did you find in this first haul?
Oh, it was like, well, we went back there, and I say we, it's me and my fellow guys on our book label. Shout out to TKAF right there, which stands for something that we're not allowed to tell. It's our secret.
Oh, really? That one makes me want to know.
That's on my book, and also plug their book, Engineering an Empire, which is a book about all the creators of the Counter Star Wars line. So that's a great book too. If any of your listeners are into Star Wars, I would highly recommend that. You can find it at engineeringanempirebook.com, or I'm sure Google will bring it right up. So it's a great book too. But anyway, me and the three other guys, and then my wife too is involved in all this stuff. Where was I going with this? You asked me how much stuff.
How much did you get?
We went back. We went back 3 times to that source. That's how much was there. It was literally a basement. Basically, imagine a basement in a 1,200 square underneath a 1,200 square foot or so home, 1,500, something like that. And basically, every wall of that basement, floor to ceiling, was tubs of Rubbermaid type tubs of toy stuff. Now, a lot of it was just junk, like a bin full of toy horses, But, and that, I'm just going off memory, but there was something like 80 hard copies in that line.
Wow. Okay. I literally like 3 or 4. Oh, my God.
I can send you some pictures. I posted pictures of a couple of, I took a couple overshots. And there was also probably 30 or 40 first shots in there. And then hundreds of carded figures as well. And then a few Star Wars things, some Star Trek stuff, miscellaneous little other things here and there too. So yeah, it was like I said, it was insane. Like I'd never really been into Turtles, and all of a sudden I'm staring at like 80 hard copies. Probably I would guess a third of them at least were painted. Wow. Probably.
Oh my God. That's the most insane haul I've ever heard of in my life.
Yeah.
That's like finding the Holy Grail. It's like,
that's what I was gonna say. So I feel like Grail is the word that gets misused more than anything when it comes to collecting. Like I feel like Grails are, because the Grail is one thing, and even if there's 2 or 3 of them, that's a Grail where there's literally, it's almost one of a kind, and that's what these paint masters are, right? Because I'm assuming they do one for one character and maybe do a couple different paint jobs of them. Like, how many would each figure typically get?
So they would probably make about 10 hard copies. And let me explain that for your viewers, listeners,
please.
What that is. So the process basically, which is way in depth in the book, if you want to learn more about the whole toy process. And I will also add the caveat, this is not how they do it today. This is how they did it back in pre-2000 kind of era. But they'll make a sculpt out of wax generally, and then that thing is very fragile. I mean, if you dropped it, it would just blow into a million pieces. So they need something more durable now that they've got that. And they do kind of like save your work, right? You don't want to break this thing and have to go sculpt it again. So they'll cast that in a silicone mold, which looks like this. So this is, what is this? This is an arm, you can see there. So they'll cast it, and this is like rubbery, right?
You're actually, Eric, could you blow up his screen right now?
Oh, yeah, I forgot I can do that now.
Oh, yeah. So there's like a silicone mold. So this would have had the wax in it at one point in time. And then they pour, there's some little ports on the side, you can see. They'll pour a hard resin into this mold and let it dry. And what comes out is basically a copy of the wax sculpting, but it's really hard, rigid, durable material. I mean, it's not unbreakable, especially thin little parts, but it's pretty durable. I mean, I've dropped pieces on the ground, on my ground in here, which is like thin carpet on concrete, and they don't generally break. Not on purpose, of course. I'd never dropped them on purpose, but occasionally. And so they would use that then for several different things. One of them would be used for the tooling master, which they would send maybe one or two of those to the tooling place is going to do the tooling to cut the tooling off of. They use that thing to basically make the steel mold. Several others. One would be, at least one would be a paint master that would also be sent to the factory to show them how they want the paint to look like. They would have a couple probably painted up for things that would stay with the marketing team for things like packaging photography, or to go to toy shows, or to salesman samples to maybe take to some big clients like Toys R Us to show them ahead of time to try and get some pre-orders or judge the how desirable this particular thing was before they spent all the money on the tooling. So generally, probably maybe 10 hard copies would be made. You know, that would maybe be a typical order. Out of that, maybe 3 tops would be painted. Sometimes it might be only 1. I mean, if they sculpted it, and you know, if they were going to Toy Fair in a month, they might say, you know what, shoot me 3 of them. There'd be 3 hard copies. We're going to paint one. We're going to take it to Toy Fair, and then they get no response at Toy Fair, and they cancel the toy. That might be all. There might be 1 painted and maybe 1 or 2 unpainted. You know, and sometimes also like the sculptors or the houses would make extras. Like a sculptor might make one for himself just to keep as a memento, or the sculpting house would make one as for reference, so that anytime in the future, if they wanted to use that to like, hey, we're making another figure that kind of looks like this one we did 2 years ago. Let's start with that rather than starting from scratch. So they could remold that, pour wax in, and then like, you know, slice and dice it to get it to be a new figure. So they'd often have an archive copy at the sculpting house as well, 1 or 2. So yeah, roughly, I would say 10 is sort of on the high side. Of course, there could be a few more. Some of them have way less than that, but that's a nice sort of round number with probably average of 2 being painted.
Okay. So compared to like how many test shots would they run like per figure then?
Oh yeah, you're not even turning on the mold machine unless you're going to run 100.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So
yeah,
there's way more test shots out there than there would be hard copies of things.
And in any other line but Turtles, you'd be absolutely right.
Really? Okay.
But Turtles is unique. And the reason why is because they did a lot of the manufacturing engineering at the factories in Asia, because Playmates was headquartered in Asia. So they already knew how to do all that manufacturing engineering stuff. So all the sculpting and that sort of the marketing stuff was done in the US. But when it came to actually, you know, how's the arm joint going to fit in, and what does that need to look like, and how does the inside of the figure look to make sure it stays together, and those kind of engineering type things, those were all done in Asia. So a normal company like Hasbro or Mattel, where the engineering was done here, what would happen is they would, you know, do the tooling, they would order first shots, and all 100 of those, or however many they ordered, would come back here. So the engineer that did that engineering could review it and look at it and make changes and whatever. So you get those first shots coming back to the United States. But with Playmates, because the manufacturing engineering was done over there, there was no reason to send first shots back to the United States. The only reason they did it is like a one-off sample for some reason, or one of the engineers went over there, might have just decided to bring a couple back with him. But there weren't, unlike Hasbro and Mattel, hundreds of first shots shipped over here. And because of, you know, especially the Playmates was Hong Kong, and the real estate was really expensive, you don't store this stuff, and they just didn't really have the mentality over there of we should keep these things. Probably 95% of the first shots for Ninja Turtles were destroyed.
Oh man.
So they're very hard to come by, the first shots, and actually are on the price level of like painted hard copies, because they're just as rare as the painted hard copies.
That makes sense.
So yeah, even though at some point in time in the past they were way more prevalent, they're all gone today. So it only matters kind of what's left, right, in the world.
That's such a shame.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite parts about learning from your book, too, is I always thought a prototype was just one thing. I always thought it was just one pre-production figure. I didn't know there was all these different levels to it, so that was something really cool that I learned. And now that I'm thinking about it, it does seem like you have a lot more hard copies in your book than you do prototypes, and I didn't really, or like first shots, and I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, basically the first shots that we did find were most, like 95% of them, relegated to 2 big collections, the one I talked to you about and the one other big one that we discovered. And other than that, it's been maybe one here, one there, but not a lot of first shots. So I wish I would have kept more. If I had known that back then, I was like, you know, I was coming from Kenner and Star Wars. I'm like, oh, we'll find more first shots. They're out there, you know, and I like didn't realize at the time, like they're not out there. I should have kept more than I did. I got a couple, but not very many.
Yeah, because they're honestly my favorite looking ones because they're always the random colors. And the one that really stuck out to me was the Rocksteady that had the Casey Jones color scheme.
Yeah.
Like that would be my dream prototype to get as a first shot that's completely done in another character's colors like that. Like, I don't know why. That one just really resonated with me.
Yeah, that one was a pretty cool one. Yeah, that was a cool one.
Yeah. So how many different people collection wise did you have to talk to then to put together the rest of your book after your initial findings?
I talked to on the phone probably more than 100.
Okay.
Visiting in person probably 50 or so.
Okay.
We did one trip, is mostly out to California. We did many, many trips to California. And actually, I'll plug another publication. My friend does this new magazine that just came out called Toy Collector. And it's collector with no E at the end, COLECTR. And it's like on issue 5 or something. But anyway, one of my partners, Stephen Ward, wrote a series of, I think it's 5 articles. I think it's the first 5 issues, all about our very first LA trip and everything that happened there. So if you want to really sort of get a deep dive into like what it's like to be in that sort of treasure hunting world and mode and what we did, it was like about a week-long trip, I think. I picked that magazine up and read those articles. He did a really good job of writing it too. It's very gives you the feel for it as well as just telling you what happened. It's like
awesome.
He very much expresses, the California vibe and what he was thinking and feeling at the time and the emotions that go along with all this stuff. So it's a pretty good article. But anyway, and then, so we went out there a lot. I mean, one of the trips was me and Matt and my wife did 2 full weeks, and we were from all the way from San Diego all the way to Sacramento during those 2 trips. And we probably visited 25 people during that single 2-week trip. And like I said, there's probably 6 or 7 or 8 trips we've done out there. So it's a lot of people that we've talked to, and there's still people I can't find. I'm like, man, I wish I could find this guy or that guy. I just can't find them.
So was everybody pretty much like involved with the creation, or is there, because in my head, I just picture like all of the prototype collectors and kind of like this Illuminati where you guys are like in the secret organization where you have all this insider info. So is it a lot of people that worked on this stuff, or is it a lot of people that are just diehard collectors that got their hands on this stuff?
No, almost I would say 99% of the stuff in the book is stuff that I sourced from original employees and contractors that work online. Yeah, there's a few pieces like that Rocksteady we were just talking about that came from a collector, and I saw he had them. Like, oh, I got to get a picture of this. There's a few in there like that, but not very many of them. Some of the photos from Anaglyph in the back of the book, the Anaglyph section came from some collector friends of mine. That's probably the biggest section that has sort of photos, and you can tell if it's really nice, great photography. That's most likely something that I had in my hands at one point. If it's kind of like, here's a Polaroid from 1998, like that's probably file photography, either the thing I don't even know if it exists. I just found a picture of it. Or
we got some Toy Fair footage in there that's clearly older, but then you have a lot of the actual prototypes that you have in here that some of them I'm looking at, I'm like, this has to be a modern photograph. There's no way this.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it seems like you would have had to have had all those things in your hands, because I can't really, other than when they're really old pictures, everything looks like I assumed you took those pictures.
Yeah, you can tell just by going through the book if it looks like it sort of has a picture frame around it. Like I told the designer, like anything that's like file photography, which what I mean by that is basically, I'd go and you'd find, bins of prototypes and stuff, but then they'd also have folders of stuff. And sometimes it'd be pictures of things, almost all the vehicle stuff you see in the book, for example, is all from file photography. None of that I found or had, with one exception. And you can tell by looking in the book, you'll see the one you'll be like, oh, every time I get a phone call, it cuts out. I had to click over and like tell my wife, hey, remember I had this interview. Stop calling me.
That's totally fine.
So anyway.
Do you have any... You said you have some Turtles prototypes. I believe I see some in the back right now. Do you have any like specific prototypes you'd want to show off? Like any ones you think are like the coolest one?
I think I see one sitting on top right there that might be a little interesting.
Why don't you guys take a look and tell me what you want me to pull out?
I want to start things off with the one on top there.
The Donatello?
Over here or over here?
Other side.
On the right. Yeah.
Which one?
The Donnie.
The Donnie in the case.
This one.
Yeah, I got goosebumps already, and he hasn't even touched it yet.
See if I can get my face, and I don't know how I'm doing this. There we go. That's better.
This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is like the first real finished turtle prototype figure, right?
Yeah, there were two test sculpts they did early on. One was done by Varner Studios. The other one was done by a studio called VAP Studios out of Cincinnati. And they basically just hired two different companies, just get two different takes on what a turtle could look like. This is the one, obviously, that they went with way more than the other one. The other one looks really dorky. It's not known to exist, and there's only like couple fuzzy videos of it. But yeah, so this is, I dubbed it the pitch turtle because it was one they used to pitch the line. That's not something that anybody at Playmates ever called it. So this is one of the painted versions. I think I know of 3 of these painted ones, and there's several unpainted ones that are out there. And my bow staff is a replica because it didn't have it. But
all right.
Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, that is a grill. That's what. How did you stumble upon this one?
Well, this one is interesting. It was a guy I talked to and visited a couple times, and actually we became really great friends. And I'd gone to his house already this week. We were out there a weekend, and we had gotten a few things and came back, and then I realized I think Matt had gotten like a Secret Wars figure prototype of some kind. I think it was because Secret Wars was done by Mattel, right? And Superpowers was Hasbro. So Secret Wars because it's West Coast. But we found out that he had 2 left legs or something like that. So we had the wrong leg. And so I texted him. I was like, "Hey, we got," and I knew he had 2 of them there, and we basically pieced out one, and we accidentally pieced out the wrong part. So I knew he had the leg. We just had to go swap it. So I'm like, "Hey, we just noticed we got the wrong leg here," and he was a bit of a hike from where we were staying. It was like an hour and a half. So I was like, can we pop back up there sometime? Maybe tomorrow evening. We might have a little bit of time, and we could swap this leg out. He goes, "Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, whatever. Just let me know. I'm free tomorrow night." And he goes, and then he sends me a text. "Oh, and by the way, I was digging around the garage and I just found this." And he sent me a picture of that thing. And I'm like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, I have to ask, do you have any interest in selling that? He's like, "Yeah, I'd consider it."
Oh my God.
So I'm like, "I'll be there tomorrow." So,
that is the find of a lifetime.
It was crazy because it's just like, sometimes you kind of know what to expect. You kind of know they told you a little bit about what they have, but there's always things like that. It's a complete surprise. You're like, I didn't know I'd be seeing this today, and that's amazing, So
yeah, I mean, I would never think I would see that thing. I think I saw Mark Taylor was the sculptor,
this was Varner.
Varner, who? Okay. Oh, Taylor did the other ones. Okay, gotcha.
Taylor was a designer. I don't think he did any sculpting. He just did design work. So he would do like 2D drawings and stuff like that.
Because I'm pretty sure I watched an Ed's Retro Geek Out where he was interviewing him, and he had one of the pitch turtles too. So I think that's at least where 2 of the 3 in existence are then. So
he had a painted one?
I'm pretty sure he did. Because that was the first time I'd ever seen one in real life, other than, or I guess
that
not
may
real
be
life,
a 4th one. I don't know, because I know of this one. I know Varner has one. I've heard rumors of one that somehow got sold in Japan, and so and then if you're telling me Mark Taylor had one, that would be a 4th one. So
okay,
there was one in Netflix did the Toys That Made Us episode on turtles about a couple of years ago. And the one they show, if I'm not mistaken, it's painted like Michelangelo, but it's Donatello's sculpt with the bow staff, I believe.
Yeah, they only sculpted one character. So They all have the bow staff, but they painted them up in all 4 different colors. But they all have it's all the same sculpt, same bow staff, so they're all like that.
Gotcha. So is that one? That's a hard copy, then I take it.
Yeah, this is resin. It's a single piece because that's how a lot of times they do concept pieces, just a one piece. They wouldn't. Unlike other hard copies, the pins are molded in and the arms can move and everything. That's just a single piece.
Gotcha. So do you have any wax prototypes? I would assume they're probably the least common then, right? Because they're so hard to keep together because of what they're made out of.
Yeah, a lot of times they would break, and a lot of times, sometimes the sculptors would melt down the wax and reuse it for another figure. I mean, that happens.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's understandable. Yeah,
because it's reusable. So they're like, okay, or they would take the figure and go, okay, I got this turtle. I need to make this turtle. I need to turn this policeman into a firefighter. Let me just sculpt right on top of this one, and so it disappear a bit. But yeah, so I can show you some. So this one's in the book.
Oh, the mini head pizza face. That's
awesome. A legendary one.
Yeah.
Does he have the hat too that goes over him, or was that not made for this figure?
No way.
Yeah, there's the hat.
Oh my god. See, like even the fact that the hat never got squished or anything, like that's amazing.
Yeah, this one was in really good shape. There's been a few of them that I've had to, like the sculptor had to repair. Like there were breaks and I just had him put it back together and like repair it as if they would have, been using it to make a new hard copy or something. So yeah, and I got
that is amazing.
This one I think is also in the book.
Oh, Krang's android body.
Oh, he's falling apart. I gotta be very careful with these. It's bad news.
Yeah, I don't want our podcast being responsible for breaking.
Don't lose that antenna.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a new one I got fairly recently. This is Slice and Dice Shredder. Cool. He looks way better without the action features.
He does actually.
That's like a really good shredder.
Yeah.
To be honest, without the paint job and the action features, he looks really spot on to the Mirage Shredder.
That's exactly where my head went. Yep.
Like if they just gave him all white eyes and just made like the skin on the face real dark, he would be like a perfect Mirage Shredder.
Right. Here's an interesting one. This is an early what they call clay for Hot Spot.
Got Hot Spot.
He's a little different.
Yeah, actually,
quite a bit bigger too than the production.
I think he looks a little cooler like this. Actually, he looks a little sad in the regular release. For this one, he looks like he looks like a smartass kind of.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's a few of the ones I have.
Those are incredible.
Yeah, that's like kind of the pinnacle, right? It's like, I mean, it's like it is the original piece of art. It's the thing that the artists. I mean, these artists were astounding. Like there's it is any artist you'd say that's in doing any other kind of more adult art, but I mean they're amazing. But they can sculpt these things and make them look like that. And that's the original. That's the one he took his little knife to. So. Yeah. I really do feel like, that's sort of the pinnacle of prototypes is when you can get either that or original artwork, like packaging. For packaging, it would be the original artwork, right?
Yeah. Well, there was some cool concept artwork in the book of like Dr. L
so much.
And a lot of characters that I didn't even know, like, I didn't know that would still exist, that Sergeant Bananas and Dr. L would still have concept artwork and Sandform and stuff.
Well, at one of I was telling you about, we had basically two major finds and a bunch of little ones. The second one, major one that I didn't talk about, we found these folders. They were in a banker's box in the guy's closet, and they started just looking through them, and it's just like,
oh wow,
oh my god, look at that.
Yeah, that's comics, but here's some.
Yeah, it's Archie. What the?
I mean,
when I see these concept ideas that never got made, I'm always like, man, I wish they made all these characters.
That's one of my favorites.
I know, like they get so much material for the main line.
That's like Evil Dead 2. He's got the chainsaw arm and everything.
But there was a couple binders here, and at the first one I already talked about, the one on the East Coast, there was also some binders of stuff, but it's just like there's like sort of a.
Oh yeah, that was in not the gorilla. That wasn't, but the cat April was in the book. Yeah,
the cat April, which they actually sculpted.
That's crazy.
The only reason I knew what that sculpt was is because I found these later. Because I found the sculpt first. I'm like, this looks kind of like Universal Monsters, I guess. And then I found this. I'm like, oh well, that's exactly that sculpt.
Yep.
The thing that's confusing though is there is no cat person in the Universal Monsters, so it is.
Wasn't it labeled werewolf actually?
I think it was, but there is the movie Cat People by RKO, so maybe it was like a Cat People reference.
Yeah, this is the one oh yeah. Where does it say on here? April is a cat. A couple of these I didn't put in the book.
I didn't see that beaver in the book. I don't remember him being there.
You can see he even says here, we'll figure out the costume later. like, yes, she's a cat and she doesn't have any clothes on.
Right. Might be a little much for
And there's the one with the costume.
I think the artists were having a lot of fun drawing that.
Yeah, these are Dooney sketches, these here. Yeah, oh, and literally right here he says topless version.
Just in case.
Yeah,
that toy was
that
going
one
to
didn't
be
make the book.
that toy was going to be for all the kids who were sad that Chitara was gone.
Yeah. Here's your hothead.
That was amazing. Yeah. I really like the idea that they said they were going to give him breakable like tables and stuff that he could karate chop in half. Like that would have been such a cool play feature.
Right. Yeah, there's a bunch of things like that that just never made it probably for cost reasons.
Yeah. I mean, Hothead's already such a beefy figure. They have to, when he was in the package, he was in that crazy pose just to fit him in. So I can't imagine they could have put tables and all this stuff in there with him. So
yeah. So out of everybody you talked to, did you ever figure out reasons why maybe like the subline that comes to mind is the Jim Lee, the ones that he drew, and they didn't make a Leonardo. And typically it just really always like, I don't know, just drives me nuts when they would do 3 and not the 4th. Did you ever find out why they would sometimes randomly leave a turtle out of a subline?
It was generally, I didn't ever ask specifically about any of them, but generally the answer is always, we didn't have the demand for that line. We took it to Toy Fair, we showed it around. We got enough demand that made it feel like, maybe we should try something here, but not enough to maybe we got to cut the budget a little bit. Let's do 3 out of the 4 because we're saving 25% of the total cost of doing this, right? And we'll put it out there, and hey, if they go great, we'll make the 4th one eventually.
Okay.
So I'm 90% sure that they were just budgetary reasons that they would do that.
That makes sense why they did it more later in the toy line then, because you can see something very ambitious like Warriors of the Forgotten Sewer, where that was supposed to be like a major subline.
Yeah.
And even like Raph, who we never saw the elf figure, it's like he was meant to exist. Like you have, concept artwork for him in the book. And that makes sense that they were really ambitious. They made this huge thing, showed off at Toy Fair, and maybe it just got lukewarm, responses. So they're like, all right, because Turtles was kind of on its way out at that time. So.
Yeah, they're like, well, let's do some of this, but let's not do all of it. So
yeah,
it's just a money saving technique. So
yeah, Leonardo.
How they chose which one, I have no idea. Well, let's nix the Leo. I don't know. They probably had some demographics, information knowing that which of the 4 sold the best and the worst. And
I've heard historically Leo and Mike have the most sales. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard Leo and Mike, then Raph, and then Donnie is like by far the lowest. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I don't know. And it could have changed year after year back then. Who knows?
Yeah, it probably did.
Yeah. So where you are right now with everything, do you feel like you've kind of exhausted all your resources on this stuff, or every once in a while do you run into somebody else new in the circle where you might be able to get something from, or like, do you feel like you're really going to be able to get a lot more prototypes for your collection at this point? Because it seems like you would have to have like a significant portion of the ones that are out there almost.
Well, I mean, I personally don't have a significant portion. I kept a lot, but we found a lot of a lot. You know what I mean? So there's a lot that we've sold and or helped the people who owned it sell, sometimes consignments, or we bought it and kept some of it. And Matt and Steven and Gary, Matt especially, kept quite a bit of stuff, Steven a little bit and Gary a little bit. But there's still it's definitely going to slow down. I mean, there's no doubt, like that 4-year period from 2017 to 2021 where I was really doing a ton of research. It was like I would get new leads, every other week. And then I would be planning trips and like find a new lead and try to work them in and figure out where on the timeline they're even going to fit. And it was like drinking from a fire hose for sure. That has definitely slowed down to like a trickle coming out of the fire hose. Yeah, occasionally I do still find a new lead, and maybe it's not even Playmates. It could be a Kenner person or a Mattel person or whatever. But definitely slowed down. But there are people that I've contacted that, that I got pictures for the book that didn't want to sell at the time. So I still, try to keep in touch with them and keep friendly in case they ever decide they want to do some of the stuff. So yeah, there's still other things out there that I know are out there I'd love to, get for my own collection. But it's definitely slowed down for sure. So it's a lot of this stuff is now in the secondary market. So now you see way more things sort of selling collector to collector than from original sources like it was over the last 4 years or 5 years.
Gotcha.
So before we started recording, you and I were talking about Earthworm Jim and Darkwing Duck, and you were showing me some of those prototypes. I know we talk turtles mostly on here, but how many action figure lines do you go that deep on where you collect prototypes?
Oh, really just the 3: Star Wars, Darkwing, and Darkwing's a small line, so it doesn't do much. Star Wars, Darkwing, and Ninja Turtles. I have a smattering of a few other things. Like I've got a couple Extreme Dino pieces that I just thought were incredible pieces of art that I've kept. I've got like a few pieces I've kept. Like I got a Batman piece I kept, just as sort of a memento of a collection that we found and bought. I've got a Star Trek piece, some random like Disney stuff. My wife has a whole, it's down below. You can kind of see it there. My wife has a big Toy Story collection of prototype stuff on these bottom two shelves. So there's that. It's mostly like McDonald's toy stuff for the most part. But
I remember those. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So, but really, just the 3 lines are sort of the main bulk, and Ninja Turtles is probably, as far as number of pieces goes, by far the biggest of the 3. So my Star Wars stuff is great, but I don't have nearly the volume of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you were saying, Darkwing Duck was such a short line. Technically, that's the closest to being complete of the bunch because
Yeah. I think I have a prototype for every unreleased figure in the line, and a prototype for most of the released ones.
I couldn't believe you had all those Wave 2 figures that never came out. That blew my mind when I saw those.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I love Darkwing Duck. Like, that'll be as I'm getting older, and like when I decided like it's time to vacate and let this move on because I'm going into retirement home, like the Darkwing stuff will probably stay with me till the
end. That show was funny as hell.
Yeah, right? It really is.
So at this point in the game for you, because you said you pretty much went from basic collecting to high level collecting in a year span. So like, what dragon are you chasing now? Like what would get you excited at this point in your collecting career?
Well, I mean, it's really, I get excited about the hunt, really. It's, the acquisition is good and all, but man, it's the adrenaline of that, going into somebody's basement is really, that's the, like, you want to talk about like why people take drugs or smoke cigarettes or whatever, right? That's the addiction. It's not really having stuff. It's more like, so like, that's where I just, it's a little bit sad because I had like a huge section of my life in like 98 to 2002 or so that I did that a lot with Kenner people, like 3, 4, 5 trips a year. And then there was a big lull. And then 2017 to like now has been again 2, 3, 4 trips a year. And now it's slowing down. It's a little bit sad. I'm like, but that's really the chase for me. It's really that adrenaline rush of like, hey, what am I going to see today? Is the guy going to, is it a new person I've never met yet? Who knows what it's going to be? Or is it some guy I've talked to that, found another box in a closet or something, like, or even like, hey, maybe I'll finally get to buy that one piece he's had that he's ever wanted to let go of, things like that. But it's really about like that getting in there, and like the treasure hunting is like where the adrenaline hits me for sure.
The whole time you were talking there, I just basically painted a new image of who you are in my head. You are toy Indiana Jones. You're going down. I literally have
a picture of Gary with one of those headlights, the lights you strap on your head. I think it might be in the back of the book even, but in the behind the scenes section. But like we're literally in this dark basement. And he's like, I'm taking a headlight next time. And he strapped that thing on. I mean, we've been in like, I just, there's been rat poop and cat piss and like been there digging through boxes of like, where you come out and your fingers are black because, the dust in there has been 20 years worth, and you're in a crawl space, you're in an attic, you're climbing up ladders. There's a lot of, it's not quite as maybe glamorous as the Indiana Jones
You're
movie.
not running to Target for a
But
quick
yeah,
run
there
in
are
and
some
out.
sort of similarities. Yeah.
You're going into these underground areas, you're exploring these ancient places and finding these amazing artifacts, and you're basically putting them in a museum. So
Yeah.
you're preserving history, and that's something that's so cool about collecting that stuff and making books like this. And just everything you do is you're not like getting these rare items and then hiding them from the world like you're, like your treasure pot that the leprechaun has that no one else can get. It's like you're preserving this history and sharing it with the world and actually teaching us about things we didn't even know about our favorite franchise.
Yeah.
So it's like
Certainly preserving the history of it is a big thing for me, because you talk to these people, and I mean, there was one guy I talked to. He's like, yeah, I just retired. I shut down my office in New York or wherever it was. I think it was I got the impression it was like in Manhattan, but maybe I could be wrong there. But he's like, yeah, it's like maybe next year if you want to come out. I called him back the next year. He's like, man, you missed it by a week. I just put everything in my whole office into the dumpster last week. I'm like,
oh my God.
Oh no, you didn't. Please tell me you didn't. And I mean, it's a little easier to hear a story like I threw that away 30 years ago, but like,
yeah,
it's really hard to hear those stories. Like this stuff is just gone, and I'm like, okay, like, or to see something that's in a box rotting away underneath a house, or where literally there's rat poop on it, and like it's like this stuff needs to be taken care of, and it's in a baggie. Can you imagine like one of these sculpts in a baggie?
That's what's crazy, and all that stuff's in such good condition. And I mean, that pitch turtle he said was just sitting in some guy's garage and he didn't even know about it. Like, that's insane to me.
Yeah. Well, it's not always in that great condition. Oftentimes there's pieces missing. Like I said, some of the sculpts needed to be repaired, and like limbs were broken and they had to be put back together and things like that. The hard copies tend to be okay because they're so rigid and hard, and they don't degrade at all. They're like it's like a chunk of rock. So, other than maybe little thin parts like a bandana or something being broken or missing, they tend to be pretty good no matter how they're stored. It's just maybe a arm or something is missing occasionally. But they tend to be pretty good. The sculpts are a little tougher, but again, the sculpts are fairly easy to repair as long as all the pieces are there. They're easy to put back together and make look real nice. So the vehicles were almost all file photography. The prototypes of the vehicles, they weren't actually things I had in hand. They were just photographs that the designers or the engineers or whatever had. So you can tell in the book, the ones with the white borders around that kind of looks like a photograph is sort of stuck into the book. Those are the file photographies, and the ones that are the glamoury shots that you can tell are kind of look like they're from a light box. They're from a light box, and those I generally had on hand.
I'm curious actually, because I've always had an obsession with the original painted prototypes, that what you saw on the photography on the package, because they always look so much cooler than what you actually got in the package. There's how many of those did you see? Because there's beautiful ones, like that hothead one is amazing. And
I mean, like I said, pretty much anything in there that looks like a glamour shot, I had in hand for the most part. With a couple exceptions, like that Rocksteady, I never had that one that we talked about. I never had that one in hand, but the rest of them, I had them. I took those pictures for the most part.
That's awesome. I saw that high one because it has a front and a back shot, and I'm like, he must have actually seen this one in person. So
yeah, that one we had for a little while. I don't know where that ended up.
So many great pieces, you can't even keep track of them all.
That is one of the best painting jobs, though, because like you said in the book, like every little scale and bump is painted on him and everything, and every detail is painted. His spines are painted, like everything's a different color. He just looks amazing.
So is everything behind you a prototype right now?
This is not.
Oh, that's a NECA.
Is that a NECA April?
Yeah. Other than that, yes.
Okay. So like, are those like mock-up carded figures behind you then too?
Actually, yeah, this April's just production, so I was wrong. This April's just a production figure. This is just a production figure too.
Okay. So I know who your favorite character is.
Right?
Yeah, I just wanted to collect something, a character, and I don't know. I just wanted to not do one of the turtles for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to do April because it was either April or Casey, and it seemed like there's a lot more stuff for April than there was for Casey.
Yeah.
The collection would be very small. So I'm like, I want to do one of them. I don't want to do a turtle, and I want something that has a lot of stuff. So like, it's either Splinter or April, pretty much. So yeah, these are all. Yeah, that's a carded. Well, you can't hardly see it in the camera there, but that's in the book.
you
hard copy there. And this is one of the molds. This is interesting. So this is one of the molds that actually has the hard copy still in the mold.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the Bride of Frankenstein one.
Yeah, it's the Bride.
Yep, that's her hair for sure. Good call.
Yeah. So you can see it's never removed. Even these little things, these little lines here where they poured the material in are still here. Those are called sprues.
Well, that's where I see those on my vintage figures all the time. They have the little chip part where you can see where they removed that. That's so cool.
That's called a sprue. That little channel that takes it down into the cavity. It's called a sprue.
That's amazing.
Here's some alternate April heads. So this is a different sculpt than what they made.
Oh, that one's a little creepy.
And here's one other one. These are all for the first April. They really struggled with the head, obviously, and then they ended up obviously making it.
I actually think that one might be a little
better.
This one's
not too bad. This one actually I think is better than the one they made.
That's what I'm thinking. I think it's better than the one we got, actually.
Yeah, and then this is a painted hard copy of the second version.
Oh, that looks nice. That's a nice
head. The hand-painted stuff just looks so good. Like, it just brings a whole different aspect to the mold.
Right, yeah. Well, the designers would always they'd always have to overdo it because they knew that the bean counters would come in and reduce the number of colors or whatever masks that they were allowed to use. And so they'd always overdo it to give the bean counters something to pare back and make them feel like they did their job.
Okay, so it was always intentionally known that nothing would ever come out with these glamorous paint jobs that they're doing. So every time the sculptor wasn't like, oh man, they ruined it again for me.
Yeah, they generally knew that it would get pared back. I mean, sometimes there are times where they'd go right in and say 3 colors only. That's all you get. And obviously that whoever was painting it generally wasn't the sculptors that did the painting. It was paint specialists. But they knew, like, if you were told to do it, you kind of had to do it. But if they're like, yeah, paint it what you think, kind of looks like this is the sketch. And they would obviously embellish it as much as they could to try and get the best figure they could get. So
the paint job I remember being, just judging from when I was a kid looking at the packages, the one that was the most different was Sandstorm. His sash that's going across him, every inch of it is with different color on the back of the package, just all silver when you look at the actual figures. Like that. I remember when I saw that, I was thinking, I can't even tell what I'm looking at in the prototype picture there, but
I don't know the exact one you're talking about right now.
I don't know if this is the one that's on the packaging or not.
Because I know the one in the book, he had the sword and the scimitar and stuff was painted. Yeah.
Oh, look how cool that looks.
Yeah, that looks so much cooler. Wow.
That's amazing. See, Sandstorm is a cool figure, but I always kind of slept on him because he felt kind of simple. If he had that extra hit of color like that, look at that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So, it is just a game changer.
The nose ring I noticed, that's awesome. Yeah.
By the way, did you guys know that the original Bebop figure, I never knew this until I saw it. Hold on, let me put him back. I saw just recently a painted hard copy of the Bebop, which I don't own, but is out there. Do you know he has a knee brace?
Yeah, a
I never knew
ACL tear knee brace, like that college football players wear. Yeah,
yeah. On the painted hard copy, that knee brace is painted like silver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when I was way better. There's a knee brace there.
When I was a kid, I thought it was a dagger, but then when I got older, I realized, it's a knee brace. I think when Super 7 did their version, they did paint it silver, I believe.
That's the first time I realized it was there was because of the Super 7 figure. I didn't even know it existed before that.
Yeah, you wouldn't even notice unless you're really looking at that figure. It just looks like pant legs or something.
Yeah, like I said, I thought it was like a dagger stuck through his pant leg so he could pull it out and use it. Because I remember as a kid, I was like, why isn't it painted? I want to see what that is. But I used to, look at every inch of those figures. I was obsessed with the detail on those figures. And that was one of the great things about that line is that you could do that as a kid. You could just take one figure, especially like Muckman or something. And you could just spend an hour looking at every detail on that guy.
Yeah, that one especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the wax sculpt that's in the book in that one, it's even almost more detailed, I think, than the, I don't know how they ever would have planned on painting that one.
Yeah.
I think Muckman works not being heavily painted, though, because if everything was painted on him, he wouldn't look like a sludgy pile of muck. He would look like too colorful. There'd be all these colors and stuff all over him. So I think it works. Speaking of the book, let's just talk about the book for a little bit, because so the part of Turtles I think I would consider myself the biggest fan of is the vintage toy line. And there's even then, like, there's stuff I knew about, like the snot-nosed gun guy and like the Mr. Bad Wrench and stuff. But there is some stuff in this book I didn't know about at all. There's a lot of stuff in this book I didn't know about at all. And it surprised me. The Army Ant Mega Mutant is awesome. There's plenty of stuff like that. But the one thing I just need to bring up, I don't know if I think it's awesome or I just think it's freaking horrifying, is this character known as the Face.
The Face, yes.
Who was going to be like, I guess almost like Zordon for the.
That's how I saw it too. That's what I saw.
But where Zordon is like a holographic face in a tube, and like, you know, the Carmen Sandiego cartoon, the chief is just like on a screen. This is a disembodied gigantic head of Pai Mei or someone just like growing out of the wall of the sewer. It's terrifying. It said it was removed because they thought it was too much like a deity or a god, but I think it should be removed because it would have given kids nightmares.
Yeah, it was a weird idea. It didn't get very far. That was a really early. They were trying to sort of flesh out, you know, what was the story going to be and what were the characters going to be, and, you know, beyond just the ones that were in the comic at the time.
Yeah.
And, you know,
it sort of demotes Splinter also, because Splinter's all
I think they decided like Splinter wasn't even around then really, and or no, he was around, but they were like, I think that was one of the reasons. It's like, well, why do we need this if we have Splinter? Splinter's sort of like the sage. Why do we need another stage like figure? And yeah, they're like, let's keep Splinter.
Yeah, that was probably like, of all the things, the behind the scenes stuff I saw in the book, and like I said, there's so much, but that was the one that just like stood out to me like a sore thumb. Like, what even is this? What were they thinking when they came up? It's described as like a mutated head on the wall. It's like the turtles sleep next to this thing. Like, that's terrifying. So
yeah, but that whole first chapter in the book is a lot about like everything leading up to the toy line. You know. Yeah. All the things they were working out and thinking about and discussing, and like, what does this need to be? And like a lot of this stuff there in that section came from John Handy, who I think was, I don't know if he was on like the Toys That Made Us episode. I think he was. But he was he was the first designer that was on the line at the time. And all those sketches in there came from him. So he had a lot of recollections about, you know, what they were thinking and pitching around and all the ideas and concepts, and none of it, you know, was like super serious. They were just throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what they liked, what they didn't, trying to figure out what would work, what wouldn't, getting ideas from, you know, the cartoon maker,
Fred Wolf.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, from those guys, and, you know, from the Playmates, and obviously from Peter and Eastman and Laird. And so, you know, they tried to figure this all out. So that's what that early stuff is. None of it, I think, it was just the process of getting them to what they eventually wanted, you know?
Yeah. And
what's super serious at the time, like, this is where we're going. It was never that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you couldn't have all like the blood and, you know, vengeance and murdering someone over a loved one and everything. Like, you couldn't have that in a kid's toy line.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they essentially, couldn't even have Raph be Raph. They had to change him up to a sarcastic one instead of the angry hothead all the time, too. So, yeah. So, another interesting thing from the book was when I saw the mock-ups for like the carded figures, and it was just like stuck to a random sheet of cardboard, like, that was just mind-blowing that is a professional mock-up to me. Like, this is going on in an official place of business.
I've never seen anything like that in anywhere, any prototypes for any line ever, other than those. I don't know why they did those. I'm guessing that it was to test the master carton, that they knew what the size of the card was, but they didn't have any cards that were like that. So like, well, let's just staple it to this and let's put them in the box and see like how they fit together, and just to see how big the master card needed to be. That's just a speculation.
Yeah.
But I don't really know why they did this that way. I've never seen another like that.
It literally just looked like something I would do if I was given the task.
Yeah. Well, Playmates, I mean, you even write in the book, and I've heard before that, you know, they started off doing dolls, doing like baby dolls and stuff. That's what they were big for. So they were really new to like the action figure world. Right. So they were probably just, you know, doing it however they thought they could do it. They didn't follow how you're supposed to do it. They just did what worked for them. So it's a sort of a guerrilla warfare style way of doing action figures. But I mean, it worked. They were the line from like 1988 to like 1993. So
yeah,
they did something right.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much they would have grown in that time either, going from a small company to being literally the biggest, toy line at the time. Like just looking like so I've seen lists before, but looking at it in the book, like seeing how figures went from 88 to having 10 figures basically, then 89 it upped it, and then by the time you get to 91, it's like 2 pages of figures and accessories.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 91, 92 was probably the peak of it.
Yeah, that's
maybe even 90. I don't know, 94 may have had more figures than any of the other years. There was a lot of stuff in 94.
I feel like 91, 92 was the peak, like post like Secret of the Ooze. That's when, like, from what I remember, like Turtle Mania was at its peak in like 91. I think 94 was probably their last call for help. Maybe that's why they
there was a lot in that year though, and after that, it really gets thin after 94.
Because that's when you start seeing all the cancellations and stuff, which you kind of see like none at first, and then they start to trickle in, and then it shifts from figures being produced to figures being canceled much more handedly.
Yeah, it's crazy to think though that if Mattel had gotten, because they went to Mattel, I believe, first for Turtles.
Yeah, they went to everywhere. I think.
Yeah, if any of those, Kenner or Mattel took them, like so many Playmates toys. They did Toxic Crusaders, they did Star Trek: The Next Generation, they did Earthworm Jim, they did all these toy lines in the 90s. They wouldn't have done any of that if they didn't get Turtles. No. So. Right. Mattel would have just had a monopoly on like the action figure market.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, if they'd done it right, who knows? But Mattel or somebody else could have screwed it up.
Yeah, that's true.
And it wouldn't have been anything. It would have been 1 year and gone, like Silverhawks or Extreme Dinos or whatever other line that went like a year or two and died.
They would have started with the face that could have ruined it right off the bat. So.
Yeah, what if LJN? They did Thundercats. What if they did Turtles and nobody liked them and they just
exactly. So who knows? Who knows what would happen? It was certainly lightning in a bottle, but it also was a culmination of a lot of creative people. Somewhat luck, but somewhat skill. Also, just nailing the exact right formula for it.
Yeah, and it was just the perfect storm at the time. I feel like it was just the right place, the right time, and all the right things happening. Like it. Again, you can't explain how big it was unless you were there. But when I was a kid, Turtles were everywhere. Like it was just insanity.
Yeah. Well, because you also, the toy line, it was undeniably a step above, like a cut above the other toy lines that were coming out at the time. Like there was just, the sculpts were just, we've said this before on the podcast, but the sculpts were just like, there was just so much more movement and just so much more personality to them.
They're just ambitious compared to everything else that was happening at the time. They were just taking risks and just doing things that, like, everything else just kind of looked flat after that. I feel like if you looked at a Motu figure, it just looked flat compared to a TMNT figure.
The cartoon was kind of like, it had an edge above the other cartoons. It was like a little crazier than some of the other cartoons. It was funnier than the other cartoons, and also you just had this toy line that was amazing, this cartoon that was amazing, and then shortly after you got this movie that was amazing. So like everything just happened right. And exactly. I find it funny that the prototype doll, the plush turtle that was shown off to pitch the toy line, was made by the Henson Company also, actually.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yep.
I remember.
It was made by a guy that worked for the Henson Company. I don't think they contracted Henson. I think they contracted this guy as a freelancer that worked.
I don't know if Jim Henson himself was there sculpting this thing. But I read in your book that who was showing it off, he took it to the locker room, like a sports game for a bunch of kids, and like the kids all loved it. I can't imagine being one of those kids who got a first glimpse into what would be the biggest kids franchise for the next decade.
Yeah, you need to find one of those kids and interview them on the show.
Yeah, that's
you're out there. You're welcome on. So what's the status of your book right now? Because I got the second print run, so I got mine off the Kickstarter when you ran that. Have you done a third print since then?
Yeah, I've done a third printing, and that will almost certainly be the last printing.
Okay.
Because the sales have really slowed down, and I've got a bunch still, and I'll have them available for quite some time. So yeah, but it's available right now. And speaking of, I know this is going to come out right after I start this, but I'm going to do a Father's Day sale. I do that every year because it seems like a good Father's Day gift, because I think mostly it's boys collecting, men now collecting these toys. So I'm going to do a 20% off sale through basically, by the time this comes out, it'll already be running, and through Father's Day. So if you order early enough, you can actually get it in time for Father's Day. So yeah, if any of your viewers don't have the book, now's a great time to get it because it'll be 20% off for the
absolutely. I recommend. So when I first discovered the first run, when I first discovered the book, it had to about been when the first print ran out, and I was kicking myself. I was like, man, why did I not get that book? And when I saw you're putting it up on the Kickstarter, like I was like, oh, my prayers are being answered. So yeah, I really appreciate you doing more print runs because, again, like it's just such a great book. I cannot recommend it to you guys enough. And it's a lot even different than you think it's going to be. Like it gets into the nitty gritty. It gets into the really just minutia of everything. And I can't recommend it enough. It's one of my favorite books I have. Not like I'm a huge literary person, but yes, I love it.
Yeah, a lot of people ask, like, does it show all the figures and all the accessories? And I always thought, like, this isn't a collector's guide. It's not about that. It does not show all the figures and all the accessories. And if you're looking for that, there's a couple great websites. And also, I'll make another plug. I think Pixel Dan is coming out with that kind of book very soon.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, but this book is art. I call it art and history is really what it is. It's just showcasing the amazing people that worked on the line and the talent they have, and the history and things that maybe you didn't know about, and unreleased figures and concepts and things that never saw the light of day and things like that. So it's really about the history and the art.
Personally, I think that everyone's different, but personally, I think that's more interesting. Not throwing shade at Pixel Dan. Like his book's going to be amazing, but I do find this more interesting though, because it's like you can go online and you can find out what all the figures are and what they came with and what their little bio card said. I want to know about the things that I didn't know about that we didn't get. And there's so much in this book that's like, it's just like story time for a Turtles fan. Like you just sat down, you're like, oh wow, you're just in awe hearing all these stories. And it's not just stories. You're seeing pictures, you're seeing prototypes, you're seeing concept artwork and like crazy stuff like the face and that insane second sewer play set for Secret of the Ooze they were going to do that was like the size of the bedroom. And
all the
I really love when I found those pictures. That thing was like, oh my god, every picture is going in.
Yeah, that was amazing.
All the unproduced stuff is what really, I mean, I don't know if it got me excited or kind of like angry that stuff didn't come out, but that's the coolest stuff is learning about what could have been or what they were thinking about doing and didn't do.
Yeah,
that's the stuff that gets me too. That's the kind of my favorite stuff as far as my personal collection goes, is the stuff that was never released. I kind of gravitate towards that.
That's something I've said on here too. When we discuss Playmates a lot on this channel and what we think Playmates should be doing. And that was something I would just love to see them do is just, I know it sounds unrealistic. I know it would be for a niche audience. Not everyone would buy it, but I would love if they just picked back up where they stopped and just started, making some of those figures that were unreleased and continuing the line and just making more of this line. Cause I mean, it would be niche, but all of us nerds in our 30s and 40s would buy them.
I mean, now's the time it's going to work.
I wouldn't say friends with, but I'm acquaintances with the lead marketing guy over there at Playmates. I'm really good friends with one of his good friends and gone to dinner with him a couple times. And I actually offered him, like, if there's any of these unreleased figures that you guys want to make, I will let you scan my hard copies.
Well, that would be incredible.
I can help you make that happen. So, far, I haven't taken me up on that. So there's no Wizard Splinter or Mike Knight coming as far as I know. Of course, they could maybe they can get those scans somewhere else too. Maybe some of the sculptors have some. But I did offer to help with that if they ever needed it. If I had the figure they were looking for. So
that's awesome. That's what I mean. You're preserving history, man. You're not only are you preserving history, that's like you're making history happen there. You're bringing lost history into reality.
I think it'd be cool if they just did just make one line, pick like 6 figures, and just do unreleased vintage, and just have them be random, like one from Warriors of Sue or a Team Ninja, Razar with fur, whatever. Pick 6 and just like make an unreleased line. I think it would do really well.
Yeah, Mattel did that not too long ago. They're pretty expensive, and I think they're PVC figures, but they did it for Street Sharks. They put out 3 figures that were never produced, and they did like a minimum quantity run on them, I'm pretty sure. But they did do that, and I mean, I'm assuming they all sold out pretty quickly.
Oh, they did, yeah. Well,
also
speaking of Mattel, I mean, Super 7 was the one who released them, but they released Hero and Eldor from Masters of the Universe. I got them over there, but they finally released them like the way they were originally going to be released. Hero vac metalized and everything like he originally was meant to be. And I would just love to see that for the Turtles, because if we got even just one, we got one unreleased figure, I'd buy that thing in a heartbeat. So
yeah, absolutely. So the reason we kind of like ran into you and started talking to you is because you corrected us about something that we've been talking about. So I was always very confused about the rights to Turtles things, like who owned what. And you let us know that Viacom pretty much owns everything, right? So all designs, everything is actually owned by Viacom. Even if it's Playmates, they don't actually have the rights to any of this stuff.
No, that's a misconception. Like somehow the guy that made the sketch for the figure owns the rights to that figure. Like the guy who drew Dr. L owns Dr. L, or the sculptor who sculpted Dr. L. No, those are all work for hire. They were doing that under contract through the owner of the IP, which at the time was Mirage. So Mirage owned all that IP back in the day, and then when Laird sold it to Nickelodeon, now Nickelodeon owns it all. Yeah. So if Nick wanted to tell Playmates you're not making another turtle figure again, they're perfectly in their rights to do that if they wanted to.
Oh wow,
interesting.
I don't think they would, but because Playmates has been such a huge part of that history, but they could do that at any time. They own everything.
Okay. So like what kind of, I don't know if you know this, but like what kind of contract are they on with them? Or do they just technically have like first dibs? Is it just that like easy for them, or is it an actual agreement that they're in then?
I'm sure there's some agreements. I don't know any of the details of any of them. Usually in the toy industries, they try to segment things out. So like, and I don't know if Nickelodeon does this or not, but typically what it would be is, okay, you guys are allowed to make toys in this scale, or for this particular market, you're allowed to make toys for the child market. You're allowed to make toys for the adult collector in 6-inch scale. You're allowed to make, plastic. You're allowed to make resin statues. That's usually how they do it, because they don't want cross competing, like two companies both coming out with their own resin statues. Like that's not really good for anybody. So generally there's some demarcation lines between the licensees. I don't have any knowledge of what those lines are, particularly between Super 7 and Playmates and NECA and Loyal Subjects or any of those, but there's probably are some sort of lanes that they have to all swim in.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Is there any other misconceptions out there that you see people commonly talking about that you have a little bit more information on that you could clear up?
I know there are some. I can't think of.
That's fine. I just wondered
in my head right now, but yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions around like the toy process and prototypes. I see that a lot. People just not understanding how the whole process works, and like calling things the wrong things happens a lot. Like, but just like, I don't know. Like one example is like, oh man, like how do you know all these hard copies are real? Anybody could just take a figure and mold it and make one. I'm like, no, you don't understand. They couldn't, because first of all, the hard copies are like 4% larger than the production figures.
Okay.
Secondly, every stage of the process, you lose detail, including when you're making a copy of that production figure. So if you literally took a production figure and cast it and made it out of resin and put it next to a hard copy, there would be no mistaking the difference between the two.
Yeah, because it would be the least detailed version of that.
The details would be all mushy. There'd be no sharp lines. It'd be shorter than the hard copy by whatever, a 1/4 inch or something. Yep. It's like, yeah, you don't understand what you're talking about when you say things like that. It's like you're not going to make a fake one of these that easily. So can it be done? Yes, especially if you have access to the hard copy itself and you want to recast the hard copy. Like that is like the only way you could really come across as a fake. But then even then, the resins are different. Like the resins they used in the 90s are different than the resins today. You can tell it in the colors. You can tell it in the weights. Like you put two of the same figures side by side and weigh them both, they wouldn't weigh the same, but two from the 90s would both weigh the same. Like there's ways to tell. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of people have. It's like, oh, there's like, I've literally heard people say, man, 90% of the stuff that's out there is all fake. I'm like, I literally have photos of us digging in people's basements and 3 other witnesses that were there. Like, and then all the other experts from the other lines can look at it and go, yeah, that looks legit. Like everything's right about it, even though they weren't there when we discovered it. But like, I hear that, not a lot, but enough. And I don't know where that comes from exactly.
People online love calling things fake.
What's that?
Right.
People online just love calling things fake.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So,
I guess because it makes them look more knowledgeable. They don't have to say anything, but it makes them look knowledgeable. So.
Yeah, it's like you know, I just always go back to, yeah, I was a toy engineer for 15 years. Trust me. I know what I'm talking about.
If anyone's going to know, it's going to be you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And after those 15 years, I did all this stuff with, you know, researching this stuff from my collecting as well. So it's like I got both sides. I got the collector side of me and all that knowledge, and then the engineering as well. And so it's like, you know, but, you know, there are fakes out there. So you got to be careful for sure. I mean, I've even been fooled a couple times with Star Wars stuff that came from a source that supposedly was trustworthy and ended up not being. So yes, you have to be very careful, just like anything you collect. I mean, even scratch figures are getting, like, there's some fakes out there that are so freaking close to the real ones. It just scares me. People are going to get scammed, but like anything, know your stuff, contact the experts, and, you know, generally speaking, you'll be safe.
Yeah. I've seen for Scratch in particular, a lot of people selling reproductions of his accessories, and they just make them out of like, but it's like, it's yellow plastic, but it's not the same plastic they used in the 90s and all that. So it's like it's a little drier. It's a little like less shiny and stuff. So
yeah. Oh, the other thing are all the times, how do you know these aren't 3D printed? Like,
what?
I don't think you've ever really seen a 3D print. There's a huge difference between resin casting. Yeah. I mean, imagine, like, you've seen resin castings, like those statues you get, like, of Marvel superheroes, right?
Yeah.
Those things are like rocks. They're heavy. It's like, 3D print. If you've ever held in your hand, it's like lighter than your.
Yeah, you can very light density plastic,
like,
very light.
Yeah,
right. You can, like, if you're thinking, how do you know these are different from 3D print? Then I don't think you've ever seen really a prototype in your hand, and you've probably never seen a 3D print in your hand, because they're very easy to tell apart. So that's another one I get a lot. It's like, I think people have this misconception, people that aren't in a technical field where they deal with 3D printing all the time, or even hobbyists where they deal with it all the time. They have this misconception that 3D printing is like the Star Trek thing, where you just, you know, make me a scratch hard copy. There it is. It's like, it's not like that. That's not how 3D printing works. You can't just print anything under the sun. You can't say, print me a light bulb, and it prints you a light bulb. Like, that's not how it works. You know, so I think, you know, it's nothing against that. I'm not calling, you know, people stupid or anything. It's just, if you don't have experience in it, you don't have experience, and you don't know what you don't know. So
you're not calling people stupid, but you're saying that is definitely a stupid thing to say.
I'm just saying they don't have the knowledge, and when you don't have knowledge, it's like, what's the saying? It's like, better to not speak, and I forget what it is. I think it's a Mark Twain quote.
Better to not say anything stupid.
Yeah. So
we'll just keep saying stupid things, and hopefully intelligent people like you can correct us when that happens.
Don't worry. I'll say some stupid stuff too, I'm sure.
Well, we've been corrected on a lot of stupid stuff we said, because we're just two guys who just love it.
Exactly. We're by no means scholars like you are. So
yeah. Well, you know, a lot of this stuff just, you know, I've got 30 years in toys stuff now, you know, under my belt, between career and collecting. So you gain a lot of knowledge over that time. And I think the best thing to do is to share that as much as possible, because that helps people to learn and not get scammed by things, and to, you know, appreciate different parts of the process more that they didn't know about, or just have knowledge of how these things are done, just for curiosity's sake. So, you know, I'm really glad to be able to keep that out there in the world, and, you know, help people to understand it. So I'm always open, like, literally, if there's something we said in this podcast that you want more information about, send me a PM on Facebook. I'm happy to chat with, like, anybody.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I really appreciate that too, because again, when I first reached out to you, I was just taking a shot in the dark, seeing if you wanted to come on here, and I was honestly surprised when you said yes. So I mean, that's really awesome that you do make yourself available to the community, because again, you are an asset. Like, you have added something to the Turtles community. You're not someone that is just here. You have made it a better place. So I mean, I just really thank you for that, and like, I really appreciate you helping everybody out.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. That's a very nice compliment.
And you can go ahead and leave your Facebook, your Twitters, and people want to find you.
Yeah, anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, well, the book, radplastic.com, like I said, through Father's Day, there'll be a 20% off sale, so get that. If you're not in North America, I would suggest look at some booksellers, like Book Depository, selling them out of Europe. Might be a little cheaper shipping than getting it from me. Maybe Amazon UK might have it up there now. The sale won't be there, so I mean, maybe with the sale and shipping, maybe it's still better to get it through me with the sale on. But so we have a group called TMNT Prototype Collectors on Facebook. That's a great group to join if you're interested in learning more about this stuff or even starting collecting yourself. I would say probably 90% of the prototype stuff that changes hands collector to collector ends up being posted in that group first. Really? So if you were interested in buying it, stuff like that, go there. Contact me. I still have some stuff available that I've had for a little while for sale. So if you're interested in starting a prototype collection, I've got things from $25 to $2,500. So there's literally something for everybody. A lot of people. That's another misconception. A lot of people think, oh, this prototype, it's just so expensive, and like, there's things you can get that are cheap. I've got like photography slide transparencies from the packaging photo shoots, like $20, like for some of these. It's like, yeah, it's a little thing, but it's someplace to start, and it's cool to say, like, this is the actual slide the photographer took the photo shoot for, whatever, this Raphael figure that I love so much. Like, it's kind of cool. And some of them are even the actual exact match to the packaging. So it's like, this is the slide from, the back of the box. So there's a whole range of stuff. If you've got $25 to spend, or $100 or $500 or $1,000, like it's just like regular collecting. There are cheap things and there are expensive things. So if it's something that interests people, I'd say just jump in small. It's a good place to start. Yeah. So anyway, that group is a great place to go. I would highly recommend following Geeks Antiques on Instagram. I have an Instagram, but that's Matt George's account, and he posts way more stuff than I do, especially the Ninja Turtle stuff. You can follow me too. I'm Chris.Fawcett, but Geeks Antiques is like the place on Instagram where our little group of writers, researchers really, I think, have a bigger presence. So I would suggest that there. And yes, and you can find me on Facebook by going to the TMNT prototype group, and I'm an admin there. So if you want to contact me directly or send me an email off of radplastic.com, those are the places to find me. Or if you're coming to Charlotte, hit me up. Come visit.
You're gonna go get a pizza with you, yeah?
Yeah, we'll go get a pizza.
Okay.
Last thing I have to say, we're the Party Wagon Podcast, obviously. Gotta love the design,
right?
Kudos to my designer, Chance Sanderson. Completely his idea. We were struggling with the book cover, and when he came up with that, and I always wanted to make the book square, so it was always square. I wanted the wide for the pictures, and when he came up with that, I'm like, oh my god, that is perfect.
Nailed it.
The front of it's square, the van square. You nailed it, dude. I'm like, we're done talking about the cover. And the same thing with the title of the book. My friend came up with that title.
Rad
And
Plastic.
it was just like, I was going through a bunch of different titles, and he said that. I'm like, I'm done. That's it. Like, there's no question. I'm not looking at a list and picking out what's the best one out of these three. I'm like, nope, that's it. Done.
Yeah.
That's the title. So
Heck yeah.
Well, it was awesome having you on. Awesome talking.
Yeah, thanks.
Greatly appreciated. If you ever want to come on again, you are always more than welcome.
Yeah, if you guys ever have something you want to talk about, just I'm happy to do it anytime. So if we want to do, next year, do something different, or if you want to talk business side of the toy industry again, or for some reason, something happens, just let me know.
For sure. We'll do a whole episode on Darkwing Duck.
Right.
I'm there for Ninja Turtles podcast, Darkwing Duck.
Yeah, Darkwing Duck. Man.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, someone's got to get dangerous. All right, thank you.
That's all we got for you guys then. So,
yep.
Take it easy, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.